One thing is that the fact that Jesus is asking, I am thirsty, he's the Son of Man. And the fact that he's asking, I am thirsty, shows his humanity, shows that he was human. He was human and divine. He came down, and that itself is justification of how big of a sacrifice God did. Put his own beloved Son down on earth for us, and for him to pay the price for us. And another thing was that I kind of noticed as I was reading through all of the 7 words, actually all of the verses. I am thirsty is the first declaration of or expression of Jesus' suffering. Before that, as we went through all of the 7 words, he was physically abused. He was flogged. He was they put a crown of thorns on his head and stuff like that. But he never actually expressed that suffering. The first time he expresses here when he says, I'm thirsty. And he says that because it's kind of coming towards the end. He's already on the cross, and he knows right from when he was born his purpose and his mission, and this is kind of coming towards, this is like the final countdown. It's almost done, and he knows that everything's been completed, and he just wants to go and be with his Father. And then again, it re-emphasizes the fact that he's human, and he was a human among us, and yet he was a Son of Man. And he did what he did was a big sacrifice for us. It was a good thing. The good thing was that Jesus died for us, even though it was gruesome. Like, I was listening to all of the other people talk about how he was expressing himself, how he was in pain, how he was in a state of shame, and he felt like God was forsaken. All of that. The good thing was that Jesus died for our sins. So in all of the suffering, that was one of the good things that came out of it. And which was God's plan and purpose for us. So likewise in our life, like several times, we go through a lot of struggle and stuff. In the end, in his time, we always get the fruit of that patience and labor if we trust and we are steady, believing and trusting in God. And this is kind of exactly what Jesus did from the time he was born. Like Ben was saying, from the time he was born all the way till the time he was on the cross, he kind of knew already. And if anyone else as a human being knew that, they would kind of prepare or something like that. But Jesus just went through it. He didn't complain about it. And then finally, when this word, I'm thirsty, comes, he's finally kind of going back to his human self, which gives us justification that he was a human, he was just among us, and he did all of that for our sake. So, which I thought was pretty awesome. So the good thing was that Jesus died for us. The second thing that this particular word that talked to me was he experienced suffering just like we did. So kind of to extrapolate on the fact that he's human, from what I read, I guess like dehydration was what caused him to say, I'm thirsty, which means it wasn't just that he didn't get something to drink, it was a loss of blood. A huge loss of blood, because 80% of your blood is water. So he lost all of that. He was really in a miserable state, and then he says, I'm thirsty. And when he said he was thirsty, as Somya read, they just put a sponge of vinegar to his lips, because apparently I kind of researched into it, and the water in Jerusalem was full of bacteria, and the Roman soldiers didn't want to touch it, so they were just trying to keep away from it, and they dipped this thing in vinegar so that they would not be infected by it. So it was that amount of I don't care about you kind of deal. Here, whatever. He just took a little branch, took a sponge, dipped it in vinegar, and took it to Jesus. So, in spite of all that, he had a like we went through the previous verses. He had a sense of forgiveness. He was just going through God's plan. One of the essential truths of the Christian faith is the two natures of Christ. Not only was Jesus fully God, but he was also fully man, like I said. And yet, he came down to live with us here on earth. When Jesus said he was thirsty, there was a sense of humanity, and like I said, dehydration. But yet, he was human in the sense that he lived on this earth. He wept when Lazarus died, his best friend, he wept. He was tempted by Satan just like any one of us. He was betrayed by one of his best friends or disciples or close companion like a colleague, Judas. So he went through every single experience that a human would, or us would. So even though he was the Son of Man, he chose to come down here and live as a human being to kind of be an example, be a beacon to us saying that, hey, I've already been through this, I understand. I know what you're going through. Sometimes our prayers and cries of suffering, we feel like, Jesus was here, he was the Son of Man, he doesn't really understand. But if you dig deeper into the Word, you see that he has already been through all of that. He knows, he understands, which gives us more of a comfort and warm and fuzzy feeling saying that, hey, I can go to him, he already knows. You always have, if your close friends or your parents or something, they have a lot more experience than you, and you always have a certain level of comfort to go to them. We should have the same level of comfort with Jesus because he's already been through that. It's just been a different day and age, but he's been through all of that, and even worse for that. So that was one thing that I thought was pretty interesting. Another thing that came from this I'm thirsty that I kind of hit me was the fact that when Jesus said he's thirsty, he was kind of crying out to all of us saying that I thirst not for physical water. I think it was more a thirst for us all to be saved, for us all to be channels, for us to be beacons of that thirst that he has for, to be saved, to be one with him. So, and I mean, he dressed in street clothes, he came down to the world, he freed us from, false teaching, and he gave us some laws that we could follow, like love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So he's done all that for us, but yet he chose to come down to this level to do it with us. And he wasn't this sovereign God somewhere, which shows a great sense of humility. So we can never know why or how Jesus is fully human, why he thirsted when he was on the cross. I mean, we can talk and debate about it, but one thing I think we need to remember is that God is the living. Remember that God is the living well of water. Like, for example, this one verse, when he was in the well, at the well, and the Samaritan woman approached him, in John 4:14, he says, "Whosoever drinketh of the water I give shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give shall be a well of water springing up to everlasting life." So it's everlasting, fulfilling water that's gushing in you all the time, which Jesus promises here to the lady when she came and asked him when she was at the well. Another instance was John 7:37-38. He mentions that if any man thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He that believes in me, per scripture, out of his belly will flow rivers of everlasting water. So this is something that's everlasting, that's going to always be there, and that is a promise that Jesus is making. And when you see the same man who is supposed to be the Son of God, who is supposed to be this everlasting flow of water, supposed to be the well of everlasting water, on the cross, saying he's thirsty in a state of humility, in a state of, he's just about to give up, it kind of triggers the fact that of how much Jesus put up for us. The fact that he died on the cross is one thing, but the fact that he put up with everything before that also kind of adds to the fact that, he really, his love for us, his unconditional love for us, forgiveness, love, compassion, and a thirst, a want for us to be saved, to come to him, to be his children, which is amazing. So one example I would like to give is like I watched this detective show. It's called Monk. I don't know, probably some people have heard about it, but it's this detective has multiple OCDs, obsessive compulsive disorders. He can't do anything without his nurse who's with him all the time. And yet, when he sees crime, it's like a duty for him. He has to get certain things done. And when it comes to crime, he puts all of that aside and he goes. If he has a fear of planes, if the criminal is there, he goes to the plane. If the criminal is on a roller coaster, he goes there. You know, so in the same way, like I remember this one episode I was watching where uh, the he's actually in a library, and he's just walking by, and he sees, and he's in his police uniform where someone can look at him and he has guns and stuff like that. Someone can look at him and say that he's a detective and get scared. But he sees a bunch of hostages. And he's being held by someone there, and he puts all of his fear behind. He wears like regular clothes. He takes away everything. He takes his gun away, and he goes in there and uses whatever police training he has to risk his own life to save those hostages. Jesus did the exact same thing for us. He did the exact same thing. He gave up everything he knew he wanted right from when he was small. He was just sent here with a purpose, and he fulfilled that from A to Z of his life. He came down, he lived like one of us, and he gave, he sacrificed, he loved God. And that was his thirst for us to come closer to him, for us to be saved, for us to be channels of his living water, everlasting water that he promises. So that was something that I